Tonight, I am thrilled to introduce an absolutely stellar table full of authors. Sarah Reese Brennan, Kelly Link, Cassandra Clare, and Holly Black. It's so cool. So thank you for joining us this time around. It's hard to introduce any of these people without hyperbole. Cassie is called the reigning queen of fantasy. She's created an empire out of her fantastic universe.
It's true. We write together almost every day. Sarah is less often physically with us because she lives in Ireland, but often she's with us. Holly and Kelly and I are literally together. And I think it's an amazing kind of experience to have that kind of communal writing feeling. We all know what each other is working on. If one of us has stuck on something, we can stop and ask for help. We know that if we give help, we're going to get help back. We can also, just stop and kind of generally talk about writing, anything that we want to, talk about characterization or pacing, that kind of thing. And I think, I don't know, I also think that when you are a writer, it's a very kind of lonely job and you work alone. And a lot of us can slip into this sort of like writing alone all day in our pajamas and, in front of the TV, getting weirder. And I think, keep a social group that's sort of focused on writing keeps us from getting too much inside our own heads. We also go on writing retreats. We'll travel. So when we're at home, we'll go over to each other's houses and write, but we'll often take like a month and go away somewhere and just write for that period of time. And I feel like those periods of time are when we do some really great, like, creative and introspective work. So, I don't know. Do you agree, Sarah Reese Brennan?
Why, yes, Cassandra Clare.
I have to go first again.
Kelly.
I think creating contemporary fantasy in our world makes us feel closer to the magic and makes the magic feel closer to us and more immediate. And one of the things that's fun, that I really enjoy is going to, places that exist in our physical world and exploring them and kind of thinking about what aspects of them might be made magical. For instance, long ago, I made Holly come with me to Roosevelt Island when I was living in New York because there is an abandoned old hospital at the south end of the island, and I thought it would be fun to set something there. So we got out of her car and we walked down there, and there were some locked gates, but we felt like those they weren't really they mean the locking. It was a mixed message, and we wanted to get closer. I wanted to get closer, so we started to climb over the gates. And the police came. And they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "We are climbing over these gates to get closer to this ruined hospital." And they were like, "Why would you do that?" And I was like, "I'm writing a book. This is my research." And they were like, "Oh, you're writing a book? Okay, what's it about?" And I was like, "Demons." That did not go well.
I know that when you began writing The Mortal Instruments, you would often say to me, hurtfully, that fairies were your least favorite downworlders.
It's true.
And yet, somehow, they've grown upon you, and now Dark Artifices is all fairies all the time. So what happened?
She realized there was no syphilis in fairyland?
I think that's probably true.
Look, I didn't read.
Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that. I really didn't like fairies when I first started out, which is funny because Holly is my close friend, and we read each other's we're critique partners, and I knew I wanted fairies to be one of the downworlders. It made sense in the context of the world, but every time I had to write scenes with the Sealy Queen, I was like, why do they talk like this? I hate it. It's like, it can't just be like, you know, you stab me. It has to be, oh, forsooth thy blade, I die upon the green sward. And Holly would come for me with her nails. And I enjoyed Holly's books. I like reading about fairies. I just like writing about fairies. For whatever reason, yeah, they crept further and further into the books. Oh, I don't know. I think that when I created the Blackthorn family, I knew that I'd already written Helen, and I knew I wanted to have this big family, and I knew I wanted to write this large family into the Dark Artifices, and I was just really fascinated. I've always been fascinated by the idea of changelings, and I was sort of fascinated by the idea of the fairies sort of taking Mark Blackthorn and, you know, returning him many years later, and, you know, how he would sort of readjust to the world and how the siblings would, you know, deal with that. And so that was the first, you know, sort of story arc that I focused on, and as I did, fairies crept more and more and more into the story. There was no way to keep them out. It was clearly a story about fairies, and I got more and more mad. But there really wasn't. I mean, I've come to love them. We've over the years we have come to a détente. And even though I still get crabby with the fairies sometimes, and I'm like, why do you have to wear such silly clothes? And what's wrong with a pair of jeans? Would it be so bad? Put on sunglasses. Sorry, I think I truly actually in this book came to love them at the moment when I had to write a dissipated fairy rebel. And so I sat down this is one of the great perks of having a writing group. I sat down with Holly and Kelly, and I was like, what are the weirdest things you can imagine happening at a party? Because that's this fairy rebel. And Holly was like, a horse falls out of a tree wearing a garter belt. And I was like, that is great. So that's in the book. And so, you know, I started to realize you could really, you know, I came to love the weird and strangeness and darkness of fairies. So I put a lot of that on Holly.
I don't really say that about the horse. It's in the book. So it's got to be her fault?
It was not by accident. Ash. He only appears very briefly at the end of Lord of Shadows. I know there are many theories about him. He's a fun character. Yes, you will definitely see more about him. He's very significant in Queen of Air and Darkness. Turns out he's sort of the key to a big part of the plot. I was in New York. I was, oh gosh, I mean, it was 12, 13 years ago. I was with a friend of mine who was an artist, and she was also a tattoo artist. So I went with her to the tattoo parlor where she worked, and she showed me her designs, which actually she is the artist who designed the real runes that you see in the books. So she showed me, you know, that she did these kind of interesting pattern designs, and we started talking about tattoos, the history of tattoos, and she talked about how every culture, you know, even those that had no contact with each other, had this idea that tattoos and marking your body were magical and that they could bring you power, especially in battle. And I thought, wow, that would be really cool if there was this race of people for whom this, you know, this worked. And what would they do? What would they fight? They would fight demons. And where would they live? They would live in New York because I live in New York and that seems convenient. And what would, you know, and I started getting the idea of Clary, and a little bit because of my friend Val, I was like, what would she be like? She's an artist, you know, and so I had these ideas, and I had actually just met Holly, so I came to her and I was like, what do you think about this? And she was like, seems good. I think you should write it. So, no, that was the seed idea. I was creating this big family and kind of thinking about each of the characters, and sometimes I base characters on real people. In this case, my stepbrother, William, who I first met when he was quite little because my parents got divorced, my dad remarried, I was older, William was much younger than me, probably 5 or 6, and he was autistic. And it was the first time I spent a lot of time with a kid who had autism, and so watching William grow up and the kind of the way that he saw the world differently and the way he experienced and processed things was really fascinating to me. And I felt like, I remember, because I loved reading, when I was growing up, books were the most important thing to me, and he also loved reading, and I remember giving him all of the Oz books, and he kind of pulled out one of them, and it was, I think it was Ozma of Oz. I can't remember the titles of these, but I asked him why, why is this your favorite? And he kind of said, well, this character, he experiences things differently and knows he is different, and I don't get very many books with characters who think like me. And so I was so interested, sad and also interested in the idea that he had attached to this book specifically because he felt like this was a representation of himself. So I thought, well, one of the things I want to do is write Tiberius, who has autism, and is also a shadow hunter, is a great shadow hunter, loves his family loves him, he's super, he's perfectly, competent, wonderful, loving person. He just processes the world slightly differently. That was the idea. Divine beings and folklore is anything having to do with common, beliefs. So beliefs about fairies, beliefs about brownies, but also vampires, werewolves, all of that stuff. And so, as Holly says, as long as you're going back to the root stuff there, you are going to extrapolate from it something that other people haven't extrapolated from it, because you're your own person with with your own brain, and so whatever you take from that original material will be slightly different.
Magnus Bane and all his very excellent adventures in the very excellent The Bane Chronicles. Excellent question. Loved it.
Yes, good question. Sarah, obviously one of my co-collaborators on The Bane Chronicles. Very fun project. Originally with Magnus Bane, I knew I wanted a character who was a warlock. And I was sitting there thinking, well, how can I do something that is literally the absolute opposite of what we think of when we think of a wizard or warlock, which is someone like Dumbledore, old, long white beard, full of wisdom, may or may not be gay. And I was like, how can we absolutely go against that and do something unexpected? And I was like, so, okay, Magnus he's young. He's a party guy. He's throwing, a weird party for a bunch of downworlders in honor of his cat's birthday. He's, whimsical, strange, wise, but, all of these sort of contradictory things all in one person. I think, that after that first book came out, I was actually surprised how many people, and bisexual, and also how many people were attached to Magnus and really loved him. And I think, he's sort of a combination of free-spiritedness and wisdom. And Sarah and I were on vacation at a writing retreat in France, and we were with my friend Maureen. And we started talking because I was trying to figure something out. I said, what would Magnus get Alec for his birthday? And Maureen, maybe she was drunk, I'm not sure what was going on. She was like, I think he would summon up a demon, and the demon would help him try to pick something, and the demon's like, get him a scented candle, everyone likes a scented candle, make him a mixtape. And I was like, this demon from the 80s, who makes a mixtape? And so, not just, this is what Maureen is like. And so, Sarah and I were like, that seems like a good idea for a story. And so we started, kind of talking about I was like, well, that could be a great short story, but I don't know what I would do with a short story about Magnus, And then we started talking about, well, maybe we could do a series of connected short stories and really get into more, Magnus's past, his background, all the fun adventures he had over his life. And so that was where we got the idea for the Bane Chronicles, and we had a great time writing it.
Terrible shadow came over me at that point. It's like, I have ideas about Raphael Santiago.
She really loves Raphael. I've heard.
That tentacle demon comes back in our new collection of stories, which Kelly Link is also joining us in writing, in which the tentacle demon is summoned by Magnus in order to talk to their son and test him on his demonic temptations. And the tentacle demon is actually kind of nice for demons. And he's just like, well, it's nice to meet you. I don't like your Uncle James. He's
Pointed me to her Tumblr and said she had been doing fan art, and I was blown away because I felt like she was really great at capturing the way I thought the characters looked. And she put a lot of thought into little details, and I more than I had even put thought into it. I was like, that's what gear looks like. Oh, that's pretty cool. Look at those buckles. Yeah, that would be useful. So yeah, I wrote to her and was just like, I really love your work, and she is a professional artist. She was working on illustrating a graphic novel at the time, and so I asked her if she wanted to pair up on projects, and so we've been working together for about 6 years now, 5 years, and I feel like it's kind of great because we have this, we have this relationship, and also I think at this point readers have a relationship, with her and her art, and so when they see her art, they're like, oh yeah, that's what the characters look like. I mean, I really love I love all the characters. I guess I would say that of them all, Tessa is the one who is most like me, like similar to me as a person in her love of books, and just the way, sort of her shyness, her obsession with books. Probably Magnus is the most fun to write, just fun to write. Okay. It's more of an answer than you're probably expecting. All right. And Sarah can help me with this one. Grab your mic. So Sarah and I are in London, right?
It's true. Hello, Cassandra. Aren't we fancy to be in London?
So fancy. Would you like to have a picnic in the park with me?
Why, certainly. Let us go and buy some pie.
Good idea.
Pie at the park.
In England, pie does not have fruit in it. It has meat and things in it. So we go to I think we're at Harrods, and we buy the meat pie and the duck pie and the poultry pie and the this pie, and some fizzy drinks, and we go to the Hyde Park, and we are eating our picnic by the river.
Turlera by the river. Oh, some beautiful ducks have come to us, Cassandra.
I love ducks. Look at these ducks. Oh, they would love to be fed. Let's give them some pie. We have some pie left over, so we're throwing the pie and the bread at the ducks, and the ducks are clustering.
Cassandra, the ducks are really. There's a lot of them.
I do.
Kind of closing in.
Sarah, I have a bad feeling. What was in those pies?
Cassie, it was duck pie.
We have been feeding ducks to ducks. We have created cannibal ducks.
Cassie, I don't mean to alarm you, but get alarmed, because there's a red light in that duck's eye.
Sarah, run!
I don't have to be the fastest, I just have to be faster than her.
So, we ran from those ducks, those evil ducks, and when I got back to where we were staying, I wrote the scene. It's actually first in Infernal Devices, in which Will and Jem are talking about the terrible ducks that they fed in the park. So, entirely from life. Do not trust ducks.
I told you that we wrote about reality. Was it another park where they saw an enormous worm, and I came back after like literally wandering around the park for 5 minutes, and they were like, we found a giant worm, we're putting it in a book, and I was like, it was large for a worm.
It was gross. Kelly, I don't really ship in Kelly's stories, so it would be like, it's like, guy and hat, other guy in the concept of time. Maybe that guy who digs his girlfriend up. Yeah, that guy. That was a good one. Kelly's stories are unusual, and with Holly, you're out. No, you're out.
We're doing you.
Okay, can we all agree on Jude and Carden for Holly? Jude and Carden.
I also have a lot of time for Ravis and Val. I love my trash prints. Quill prints. It's a tie.
Okay, fair enough. I do love a pet. I mean, you know, sometimes I look at my cats and I think, are my cats spoiled? As they each have their own individual iPad and yurt. And then I'm like, no, it's normal. So, yes, as Sarah said, I'm branching out into dogs in the last hours, and we just finished working together on a story for Ghost of the Shadow Market about Matthew Fairchild, who's one of the big main characters, Charlotte and Henry's son, in the last hours. And he has a dog that his Parabatai James gave to him, and it's an adorable puppy. And so that dog is going to be significant in the books.
What if she killed Matthew but spared the dog? Killed James and spared the dog. I mean, whose life are you bargaining for here? In the short story we just completed, Matthew lies on the ground and cries, and then the dog cries outside the door. It's so great.
Dogs are like that. Cats, not so much. If I like cry, my cats come over to me and are like, food is not going into me. The problem. So yes, look for dog and branching out. We can have anything. Ferrets, who knows? Iguana. Who's gonna die, and that death is gonna be important. You know, we're not talking like, you know, they ran into the room and stabbed a guard, he fell over. Not that guy. You know, and their death is gonna be significant and significantly affect the other characters. You do spend as much time on that character as you would on the characters who are going to live and see to the end of the story, because their lives are just as important. They have just as much of an effect on the story. And I try to think of the characters as people who I am going to visit for some period of time and tell the story of the time that I spend with them. And for these characters, it's just a little bit of a shorter time. I mean, I love Diana. I want her to be happy. I think that one of the things that we know about the Clave and its current laws is that they're bad. And that's something we've been coming to over all of the mortal instruments and into the dark artifices. And we're starting to really see, especially with, you know, what happens in Lord of Shadows, how much those laws that are unfair affect the characters that we care about and the Shadowhunters in general. So all I can say is the end of Queen of Air and Darkness brings us to a thing that changes the whole Shadowhunter world completely, totally. Totally turns it upside down. It's going to be completely different than it's been before, so you're going to see a huge change. I can't say what it is, but the tagline for this book that my publisher came up with was "Everything changes." So you're going to see how that's going to affect Diana, affect Ty, you know, affect Alec and Magnus, you know, affect everyone who's sort of been affected by the unfairness of the Clave. And I think that's, you know, really the big important story that's going to be told going forward to the end of the series.
Thank you guys so much. Okay, now I can tell you're the best audience ever because you didn't move. Thank you.